6 months ago, this aircraft was killing Allied pilots over the skies of Germany. Today, a 26-year-old Scotsman is about to climb into its cockpit. He has no flight manual. He has no instructor. The engines that wait beneath those swept wings have killed more German pilots than American bullets ever did, and if he touches the throttle the wrong way in the next 90 seconds, he will burn alive at the controls of the very weapon his enemies could not master. His name is Eric Brown, and what he is about to do, no Allied pilot has ever done before. September 1945. Schleswig airfield, northern Germany. The war in Europe has been over for 4 months, but the smell of it still lingers in the hangar. Burnt oil, cordite, wet canvas, the iron tang of machines that killed and were killed in. A young man in a Royal Navy flight suit walks across the apron. He is 26 years old. He stands no taller than 5 feet 7, and the German ground crew watching him from the shadows of the hangar must think there has been some mistake. This cannot be the pilot they have been told about. This cannot be the man who has come to fly the most dangerous aircraft in the world. His name is Eric Melrose Brown. The Royal Navy calls him Winkle, because he is small, because he fits where larger men cannot, because in cockpits designed for giants he disappears into the seat like a periwinkle into its shell. He has already flown more aircraft types than any pilot alive. By the time he dies, 70 years from now, that number will reach 487. No one will ever come close, but on this September morning he is not thinking about records. He is looking at the aircraft in front of him. It has no propeller. It has swept wings, low and predatory. It sits on a tricycle undercarriage with the nose lifted, as if it is already in flight, already running. The fuselage has the shape of a shark. The 2 engines hang beneath the wings like sleeping animals. In the nose, 4 30mm cannons wait, the heaviest firepower ever fitted to a fighter in this war. This is a Messerschmitt 262, the first jet fighter the world has ever seen in combat. 6 months ago, this aircraft would have killed him on sight. He climbs the ladder, he settles into the seat, he looks at the controls, all marked in German, all of them familiar because he has studied them for weeks, because he speaks the language fluently, because the road that brought him to this cockpit began 9 years earlier, in Berlin, in a city that no longer exists. He closes the canopy. To understand how a Scottish boy ended up at the controls of Hitler's wonder weapon, you have to go back. Not to the war, before Hitler, before any of it began. You have to go back to a small airfield called Turnhouse, just outside Edinburgh, in the summer of 1927. A boy of 8 stands at the edge of the grass runway, holding his father's hand. The father is Robert Brown, a former pilot of the Royal Flying Corps. In the last war, Robert started as a balloon observer, strapped to a wicker basket beneath a hydrogen bag, drifting above the Western Front, watching for German artillery. The life expectancy of a balloon observer was measured in weeks, so Robert did what desperate men do. He learned to fly. He survived. He came home, and now on this Saturday afternoon he is going to put his sons in a Gloucester Gamecock, a small wooden fabric biplane with an open cockpit and a roaring radial engine. He lifts the boy onto his knee. The child's legs cannot reach the rudder pedals, but the father wraps the boy's small hands around the control stick. "Hold this," he says. "Don't let go." They take off. The wind hits the boy's face. Edinburgh shrinks below them. The 4th bridge crosses beneath the wings like a child's toy. Eric Brown does not feel fear. He feels something he will spend the rest of his life chasing. He will never want to be on the ground again. 9 years pass. The boy grows. He studies at the Royal High School in Edinburgh. He is bright, quick with languages, hungry for the air. His father takes him to Germany in 1936, ostensibly to watch the Olympic Games. The Berlin Olympics, the games where Hitler will stand in the stadium and try to prove to the world that the new Germany has risen. But Robert Brown has another reason for the trip. He belongs to a fraternity of old pilots. After the Great War, the surviving flyers of both sides began to meet. Germans and Britons, Frenchmen and Americans, men who had tried to kill each other in the skies over Flanders. They sat together, they drank together, they told stories that no civilian could understand. The leader of the German group is a man named Ernst Udet. 62 confirmed kills in the last war, a national hero, a drinker, a charmer, a stunt pilot famous across Europe. And in this year, 1936, a senior officer in the new Luftwaffe, Robert and Eric, arrive in Berlin. Udet greets them like family. And then, on a summer afternoon, he turns to the 17-year-old boy and says something that will change his life. "Come with me, I will take you flying." They drive south of Berlin to an airfield called Halle. Waiting on the grass is a Bücher Jungmann, a small, beautiful, fully aerobatic biplane. Udet helps the boy into the front seat. He climbs in behind him. The engine fires. What follows, Eric Brown will remember for the rest of his life. Udet does every maneuver in the book. Loops, rolls, inverted spins. The boy's stomach is somewhere behind him, somewhere above him, lost. The horizon spins, the world turns inside out, and then, as they approach the runway for landing, Udet rolls the aircraft onto its back. Inverted, upside down, the boy is hanging in his straps, the runway is rushing toward him, but it is above his head, not below his feet. They descend 50 feet. The wingtips of the Jungmann are clearing the grass by inches. The boy is certain he is about to die. At the last possible second, Udet rolls the aircraft upright and drops it onto the runway. He bursts into laughter. The laughter of a man who has frightened a child on purpose and enjoyed every second of it. As they walk back to the car, Udet puts his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You must work on your German," he says, "and get into a flying organization. If you become something, come back and find me." The boy nods. He cannot speak. His knees are still shaking. Here is what neither of them know. 5 years from this moment, Ernst Udet will put a pistol to his own head and pull the trigger. The strain of running Luftwaffe aircraft procurement under Hermann Göring will break him. He will die in November of 1941, and the man who taught Eric Brown to love German aviation will be buried by the Reich he helped to build. But that is the future. In 1936, on the grass at Halle, 2 pilots shake hands, and the seed is planted. Eric returns to Scotland. He enrolls at the University of Edinburgh, reads modern languages, joins the University Air Squadron, learns to fly the Miles Magister and the Gloucester Gauntlet. The Foreign Office takes notice. They like bright young men with German on their tongues. They offer him a posting. In the summer of 1939, he is sent to teach English at the Salem School near Lake Constance, deep in southern Germany. A delightful establishment, he later calls it. Beautiful country, good food, a 19-year-old's dream. He has even brought his car with him. An MG Magnet, British Racing Green, parked in the courtyard of the school. On the 2nd of September 1939, he drives to Munich for the weekend. He sleeps in a small hotel. He has no idea what is happening 400 miles to the east. At 6 o'clock the next morning, there is a thunderous knock on his door. He opens it. A woman is standing in the corridor, flanked by 2 men in black uniforms, silver runes on their collars. SS officers. The woman speaks in clipped, polite German. "Our countries are at war. You will come with us." He has time to grab his coat. Nothing else. They put him in a car. They drive him to an SS jail in Munich. They lock the door behind him. Eric Brown is 20 years old. He has no idea if he will see Scotland again. 3 days he sits in that cell. 3 days of silence, of stale bread, of listening to boots in the corridor. On the 3rd morning the door opens. A young SS lieutenant steps in. He cannot be older than Brown himself. He is smiling. "You're being taken to the Swiss frontier," he says. Red Cross exchange. "You're going home." Brown does not believe him, not until they put him in the back of a staff car and drive south, down through Bavaria, into the green hills that climb toward the Alps. The lieutenant is friendly. He apologizes for the inconvenience. "War is war," he says, and then at the Swiss border comes the strangest moment of the whole strange episode. They give him back his MG Magnet, his car, his own British Racing Green sports car. They have driven it down from the school. They are returning it to him, fully fueled, keys in the ignition. He stares at the lieutenant. He cannot understand. The young man shrugs. "We have no spare parts for it," he says. "It's no use to us. Take it." Drive home. And so Eric Brown drives his MG across the border into Switzerland, alone, at 20 years old, while behind him the Wehrmacht is rolling into Poland, and the world is falling into the second great war of the century. He reaches the British embassy in Bern. The ambassador interrogates him. He is told to return to Britain as fast as possible. He takes the train across France, the ferry across the Channel, the long road back to Edinburgh. He has been at war for 10 days. 2 weeks later, on the 17th of September, the Royal Navy aircraft carrier HMS Courageous is torpedoed in the western approaches. She rolls over and sinks in 20 minutes. 518 men die. Most of her pilots go down with her. A notice appears on the RF board. The Fleet Air Arm is short of pilots. Anyone who would like to transfer should put their name down. Eric Brown picks up the pen. He does not know it yet, but the road he has just stepped onto will, in 6 years, lead him back to Germany. To the cockpit of a Messerschmitt 262, to an interview with Hermann Göring, to the gates of Bergen-Belsen, and to the question that no one, not even he, will ever fully answer. What was the cost of the wonder weapon that came too late? While Eric Brown is sailing into the cold grey Atlantic in the autumn of 1941, 400 miles to the east, in a hangar at Augsburg in southern Germany, another story is already 6 years old. It begins on a drawing board in 1938. Willy Messerschmitt, a thin man with sharp eyes and a chain-smoker's cough, sits in his office at the Bayerisch Flugzeugwerke. He is 40 years old. He has just been handed a contract from the Reich Air Ministry that no one in aviation has ever held before. He has been asked to design a fighter aircraft that will use a new kind of engine, an engine with no propeller. An engine that breathes fire from its tail. The Germans call it the turbojet. Across the Channel, an English engineer named Frank Whittle has been working on the same idea since the late 20s. Quiet, brilliant, almost broken by the indifference of the British Air Ministry, Whittle has built his engine on a centrifugal principle. The air spins outward through a great rotating disc, is compressed, mixed with fuel, ignited and expelled. It is simple. It is reliable. It will last 100 hours before it needs to be torn down. In Germany, a young physicist named Hans von Ohain has chosen a different path. The axial flow engine. The air passes straight through, compressed by a series of bladed discs in a line. It is more complex. It is more powerful. It is the future. Every jet engine you have ever flown on, every airliner that has carried you across this country and across the ocean, descends from what Hans von Ohain built. But it has one problem. It runs hot, brutally hot. The metal at the back of the engine glows white. To survive that heat, you need nickel. You need chromium, you need cobalt, and in 1941 the British blockade is cutting Germany off from every one of them. On the 27th of August 1939, just 5 days before the invasion of Poland, a small pale aircraft called the Winkle 178 lifts off from a field at Rostock. It is the first jet-powered aircraft in the history of the world. The men who watch it fly are silent. They have just seen the future, and then, with a kind of bureaucratic blindness that will define so much of the Reich's war, the project is shelved. Winkle is told to focus on bombers. The torch passes to Messerschmitt. On the 18th of April, 1941, a pilot named Fritz Wendel climbs into the prototype Messerschmitt 262. The aircraft has the shape of what it will become. Swept wings, tricycle undercarriage, sleek shark-like fuselage, but the engines are not ready. The Junkers Jumo 004 turbojets are still on the test bench, still failing, still burning out. So Messerschmitt has bolted a piston engine to the nose, a Jumo 210 Bravo with a propeller. The world's first jet fighter takes its first flight powered by a propeller. The image is almost absurd, a fish breathing through gills it does not yet have. It will be another 15 months before the 262 flies on pure jet power, the 18th of July 1942. Leipheim Airfield, Fritz Wendel again at the controls. The two Jumo engines howl to life. The aircraft accelerates down the runway. It will not lift. It rolls and rolls, eating up the grass, the throttle wide open, and still it will not lift, because no one has yet understood that on a tricycle aircraft you must tap the brakes to break the suction of the tail. At the last possible second, Wendel does it instinctively. The tail comes up, the aircraft leaps into the air, the jet age has begun. But the engines that carry it into the sky are dying as they fly. Adolf Galland, the cigar-smoking, Mickey Mouse-loving general of the German fighter arm, flies the 262 for the first time in May of 1943. He lands, he climbs out, he says one of the most famous sentences in aviation history. It felt as if angels were pushing. He goes straight to Göring. He demands that every fighter factory in the Reich be converted to build the Tu-62. He says the war can still be turned. And then, in November of 1943, at an airfield called Insterburg in East Prussia, Adolf Hitler walks out to inspect the new aircraft. Willy Messerschmitt is at his side. Hitler stops. He stares at the jet. He turns to Messerschmitt and asks one question. Can this aircraft carry bombs? Messerschmitt, eager to please, says yes. It is the worst answer he will ever give. Hitler orders the Tu-62 converted into a bomber, a Blitz bomber. He believes that what Germany needs is not a fighter to shoot down the American bombers raining fire on her cities, but a bomber to retaliate against England. The argument is insane. The Tu-62 cannot carry a useful bomb load, it cannot dive accurately, it cannot do what Hitler is asking. But Hitler is the Führer, and his word is law. Months are lost, engineers are pulled off the fighter program. Bomb racks are designed and tested and redesigned. Galland is told to be silent. He is not silent. He fights. He argues. He goes around Göring and pleads with anyone who will listen. The delay will eventually be undone, but the cost in time is irrecoverable. Months in 1944 are months in which the bombs are falling on Hamburg, on Berlin, on Dresden, and the Tu-62 sits in its hangars waiting. And while it waits, something else is happening that history has been slower to remember. 40 miles east of Augsburg, in a wooded valley near the village of Burgau, the SS is building a factory underground. The Germans call it Kuno. The walls are reinforced concrete, hidden beneath fir trees, invisible from the air. The workforce is not German. The workforce comes from the concentration camp at Mauthausen and its satellite at Gusen in Austria. Polish, Russian, Hungarian, Jewish. French, Italian, men in striped uniforms whose names are not recorded, whose deaths are not counted. They live on watery soup and a slice of black bread. They die of typhus and starvation and beatings, and they are replaced from the camps the next morning. They are building the wings of the Messerschmitt Tu-62. They are building the fuselages. The most advanced aircraft of the Second World War is being assembled by slaves. When Eric Brown later flies the Tu-62 at Farnborough, he will not know this. He will write about its swept wings and its axial engines and its quantum leap in performance. He will not know that the wing he is admiring, the perfectly engineered laminar flow wing, was riveted together by a man from Krakow who weighed 80 pounds when he died. This is the truth of the wonder weapon. This is the truth that does not appear in the design drawings. While the slaves are building the jets, Eric Brown is fighting his own war on the Grey Sea. In September of 1941, he is posted to a strange little ship called HMS Audacity. She is not a real aircraft carrier. She is a captured German banana boat, the Hanover, whose superstructure has been sliced off and replaced with just over 400 feet of flat wooden flight deck. She has no hangar. The aircraft are tied down on the open deck, exposed to the salt spray and the storms of the Atlantic. She carries up to 8 Grumman martlets, the Royal Navy's name for the Wildcat, and a few hundred souls. The Wildcats fly from Audacity to escort convoys between Liverpool and Gibraltar. The convoys are slow. The Atlantic is black with U-boats. And above them, hunting them, circles a long-range German aircraft that the convoys fear more than the submarines themselves, the Fokker-Wulf 200. The Condor, a 4-engined former airliner that the Germans have turned into a maritime patrol bomber. It cruises high above the convoy, just out of range of the ship's guns. It radios the position to the U-boat wolf packs. The wolves close in at night, the convoys burn. On the first voyage of HMS Audacity, the squadron commander, Brown's commanding officer, attacks a Condor. He hits it. He sees the inboard engine catch fire. And then, in a moment that 22-year-old Eric Brown will remember for the rest of his life, the commander does something fatal. He flies in close to inspect the damage. The Condor's gunners open fire. A cannon shell tears through the cockpit. The commander is dead before he hits the water. 5 minutes into the squadron's first real combat, the man who led them is gone. But the loss teaches them. Brown studies the Condor like a man studying a tiger. He looks at the gun positions. The upper turret, the ventral gondola, the waist guns, and he finds something. The gunners cannot fire directly forward. If they did, they would shoot off their own propellers. There is a cone of silence in front of the Condor, a blind spot the size of a small church. The next time Brown meets a Condor, he attacks head-on, wildcat against Focke-Wulf. He opens fire at point-blank range. The windscreen of the German aircraft explodes. The Condor falls into the sea in a flat, dying glide. 2 of the crew crawl out before it sinks. They do not last long in the Atlantic in December. Brown will use this attack 5 more times. The other Wildcat pilots adopt it. The Condors begin to die, but Audacity's luck runs out on the 21st of December 1941. She is escorting convoy HG-76 home from Gibraltar. The escort commander, a young captain named Frederick Walker, is brilliant. Walker wants the carrier in the middle of the convoy, surrounded by the merchant ships, hidden from the U-boats. But Audacity's own captain, Commander McKendrick, disagrees. He thinks the carrier is too valuable. He pulls her out of the formation and zigzags alone through the night, miles from the convoy, blind in the dark. A U-boat finds her. It is U-751. Her captain, Gerhard Bigog, fires a salvo into the dark, hoping. 1 torpedo strikes Audacity in the stern. It blows away her rudder. She slows. She drifts. U-751 surfaces 200 yards off her port side. In the moonlight, Brown can see the German captain on the conning tower. He can see the gold braid on his cap. For 10 minutes, no one fires. 2 ships in the dark, watching each other across 200 yards of black water. And then a young British seaman, his nerves shattered by the waiting, runs to one of the 20mm cannons on Audacity's deck and opens fire. The U-boat captain fires 4 torpedoes in reply. All 4 hit. The bow of Audacity is blown clean off. She tips forward. The cables holding the Wildcats to the deck snap one by one. A sound Brown will hear for the rest of his life, a sound like the strings of a piano breaking, and the aircraft slide down the tilting deck and crush the sailors at the stern. Men go over the side, killed by their own aircraft, knocked into the freezing Atlantic in their nightclothes. Brown does not wait. He runs to the rail. He jumps. The water is so cold it does not even register as cold. It registers as a knife. He surfaces. He finds his flight leader. They tie themselves together with a cord. Other men gather around them, 26 in all, lashed together in a circle in the December sea, 200 miles from the coast of Spain. The cold begins its work. One by one, the men around Brown stop talking. Hypothermia comes for them. They slip into sleep, and when they sleep their heads fall forward, and they drown in their life jackets while still tied to the men beside them. And the living have to do something terrible. The living have to cut the dead loose, because a dead man in the water is a weight, and a weight will pull the living down. 3 hours in the Atlantic, the circle shrinks, 26, 20, 15, 10. When the corvette finally finds them, only 2 are still alive. Eric Brown and his flight leader. Why them? Because they had something the others did not. Their life jackets had a small float at the back of the neck, a Mae West with a head support that held their faces out of the water even when they fell asleep. Brown is 22 years old. He has just watched 24 men die in his arms. He goes home. He marries a woman named Lynn McCrory. He receives the Distinguished Service Cross, and then the Navy sends him to a place called the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough. And the rest of his war is fought not in cockpits over the sea, but in test flights over the Hampshire countryside, where he flies every aircraft the Allies can capture or build, where he learns the strange new physics of speeds approaching the speed of sound, where he becomes, before he turns 25, the most experienced test pilot in the Royal Navy. While Brown is at Farnborough, the 262 finally goes to war. In July of 1944, an experimental unit called Erprobungskommando 262 begins flying combat sorties from the airfield at Lechfeld. On the 26th of July, a lieutenant named Alfred Schreiber attacks a British Mosquito reconnaissance aircraft over Munich. He damages it. It is, almost certainly, the first time in history a jet fighter has engaged an enemy in the air. In October, a new unit forms. Commando Nowotny, named for its commanding officer, Walter Nowotny. Nowotny is 23 years old. He is Austrian, born in the small town of Gmund. He has 255 victories on the Eastern Front, with 3 more to come on the 262 before he dies. He wears the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords. He is one of the most decorated fighter pilots in the Luftwaffe. He has been chosen to lead the world's first operational jet fighter unit because he is brilliant, because he is brave, because he is, in the eyes of Berlin, the perfect Aryan warrior. He arrives at the airfield of Akma in late September. He has 32 6D2s. He has barely 20 trained pilots. He has a mission no one has ever flown before. For 5 weeks he tries. The jets take off. Some come back. Some do not. The engines fail. The Jumo 004, the marvel of German engineering, has a real service life of 12.5 hours. Adolf Galland will confess this to Erich Braun after the war, will say the figure with a kind of bitter laughter. 12.5 hours. The engines flame out on takeoff. They flame out on landing. They flame out in the middle of a turn. The pilots die not because the Americans shoot them down, but because their own aircraft kill them. On the 8th of November 1944, Walter Nowotny takes off from Akma to intercept an American bombing raid. What happens next, no one knows for certain. The radio transmissions are confused. The witnesses on the ground tell different stories. What is known is that his 262 comes down in flames near the airfield. The initial Luftwaffe report blames an American P-51 Mustang. Later investigations suggest something else, the engines, the brittle, hot, hungry Jumo 004s that he could not push without killing himself. Most modern historians believe Nowotny's engines failed him and the Mustang found him already crippled. He is 23 when he dies. They bury him with full honors. They name a barracks after him. They write his story into the propaganda films. But the truth of his death, like the truth of the factory at Kuno, will not be spoken in the newsreels. The wonder weapon is killing the wonders who fly it, and in his cottage in Hampshire, Erich Braun sleeps beside his wife. He does not yet know that in less than a year he will be sitting in Walter Nowotny's seat. He will be flying Walter Nowotny's aircraft. He will be the first Allied pilot to truly understand what the Germans built and what it cost. The war is not yet over. But the world it will leave behind is already taking shape, written in jet exhaust and slave labor and the bones of pilots in the cold Atlantic. And the man who will tell the whole story is, tonight, still only 25 years old, April 1945. The Reich is dying. Soviet tanks are in the suburbs of Berlin. American columns are pushing east across the Rhine. British soldiers are moving through the flat country of Lower Saxony, advancing toward a town called Bergen, near a place no Englishman has yet heard spoken aloud. Bergen-Belsen. And in the chaos of this collapse, the Royal Navy has given Lieutenant Commander Erich Braun a new assignment. He is to command the captured enemy aircraft flight. He has 3 orders: find the German supersonic wind tunnels, locate and, if possible, fly the most advanced German aircraft, and interrogate the men who built them. He crosses into Germany in a jeep. He is 26 years old. He speaks the language. He knows the country. He has been here before as a boy, as a student, as a prisoner. Now he is coming back as the victor. What he finds in the first days astonishes him. At a place called Welkenrode, hidden in a forest near Braunschweig, the Germans have built 3 supersonic wind tunnels. 3. The Allies, for all their wealth and industry, do not have one. He walks through the empty buildings, past gauges and ducts and instruments that have been left exactly as the engineers abandoned them. The Germans were not hiding their advantage. They were showing it. They had wanted the Allies to see. In Bavaria, at a place called Kochel, he finds a wind tunnel that can generate an airstream at Mach 4.4. 4 times the speed of sound. It was designed for a man named Wernher von Braun, the rocket engineer, the architect of the V2. Braun stands beside the great machine. He understands in that moment that if the war had gone on for another year, the Germans might have flown faster than sound. Not the Americans, not the British, the Germans, but the war did not go on another year, and Braun is here now walking through the bones of what might have been. And then, before he can fly the jets, before he can interview Göring, he has to do something else. He has to go to Belsen. The British Army reaches the camp on the 15th of April, 1945. What they find has no name in any language. 60,000 prisoners are alive when the liberators arrive. They are skeletons in striped rags. 13,000 corpses lie in the open, unburied, stacked in heaps that the human mind refuses to process as human. Typhus is everywhere. The SS has fled, except for the guards who could not get away. In the 6 weeks after the gates are opened, another 14,000 prisoners will die despite everything the British medics can do. Brown is sent in because he speaks German. He is needed to interrogate. He walks through the gates. He never speaks much about what he saw inside. In all the long years of interviews that follow, in all the documentaries and the books and the conversations, he returns to one detail again and again. Not the bodies, not the survivors, the smell. He says it is the smell, not the bodies, that he can never wash out. They bring him a prisoner, a young woman in SS uniform, 21 years old, blonde, pretty in a way that the men around her find disturbing. Her name is Irma Gries. She is not, as some accounts will later claim, a commandant of anything. She is an Aufseherin, a female guard, who has served at Ravensbrück and Auschwitz-Birkenau and now Belsen. She is 21. She has been beating women to death with a riding crop since she was 19. Brown sits across from her in a small room. He speaks to her in German. She does not answer. She stares at the wall. He asks her about her duties. Silence. He asks her about Auschwitz. Silence. He asks her about the women she killed. Silence. And then suddenly she stands up. She snaps to attention. She throws her arm out in the Hitler salute and shouts the words at the top of her voice. Heil Hitler! She sits back down. She returns to silence. She will not say another word. In December of 1945, Albert Pierrepoint, the British hangman, will travel to Hamelin prison. He will execute Irma Gries on the 13th of December. She will be 22 years old. Pierrepoint will later write that she walked to the gallows without trembling. When the hood went over her head, she did not flinch. Brown remembers her until the day he dies. He calls her simply the worst human being I have ever met. And then, the day after she is taken away, he has to go and fly the jets. This is the strange duality of his life in 1945. In the morning, the camp. In the afternoon, the cockpit. The horror and the wonder on the same calendar page. He flies the Messerschmitt 262 at Farnborough. He takes it up high. He pushes the throttle forward, gently, gently, because he has been warned that the Jumos will flame out if he is rough. He levels off. He reads the airspeed indicator, 568 miles per hour. The fastest aircraft in the Royal Air Force, the Spitfire Mark 14, tops out at 446. The 262 is 122 miles per hour faster than the best fighter the Allies possess. He flies it again. And again. He finds the weaknesses. There are no dive brakes. When the 262 attacked the American B-17 formations, it closed so fast that the pilots had less than 2 seconds of firing time before they had to break away. 2 seconds. At 600 yards you could not aim. You could only point and pray. Brown realizes that if the Germans had fitted dive brakes, doubling that firing window to 4 seconds, the bomber war over Germany might have ended differently. And the engines, the beautiful, terrible engines. He learns to handle them like a man holding a lit fuse. He learns why so many German pilots died not in combat, but on takeoff, on landing, in the long, slow phases of flight, where they were most vulnerable to the 800 American Mustangs that hunted them at every airfield in the dying Reich. He flies the Arado 234, the world's first jet bomber. He flies the Heinkel 162, the people's fighter, built of wood by teenagers in caves. He is, by his own account, the only Allied pilot ever to fly the Messerschmitt 163 Comet under power, the rocket plane, with hydrogen peroxide tanks built into the arms of the pilot's seat. He is told that if a bullet pierces those tanks, the fuel will dissolve the pilot in 9 minutes. He flies it anyway. He flies them all, 487 types before he is done. No one will ever match the number. But the most important thing he does in 1945 is not in a cockpit. It is in a small room in the German city of Kiel on the 14th of May, 10 days after the German surrender. He has bargained for this meeting. The Americans wanted 2 more Arado 234s from the British zone. Brown told them his price. 1 hour with Hermann Göring. They agreed. He is led into the room. Göring is sitting at a table, in his pale blue Luftwaffe uniform, with the Reichsmarschall's collar tabs still attached. He has been arrested. He is awaiting transfer to American custody. He will be at Nuremberg within months. He has 14 months left to live. He has lost 100 pounds in the last year. The flamboyant, jowly figure of the propaganda films is gone. What sits across the table from Brown is a tired old man with sharp blue eyes and a polite smile. Brown has been told he may not ask political questions. The Nuremberg trials are coming. He must stay on aviation, on operations, on the war in the air. He asks Göring about the Battle of Britain. Göring does not hesitate. He says it was a draw. Brown asks him why. Göring explains. He says, look at the casualty lists. The Luftwaffe lost so many aircraft. The Royal Air Force lost almost as many. The numbers, he says, are nearly equal. And then he says the second thing, the harder thing. He says, we did not lose the Battle of Britain. We withdrew. The Führer ordered our air units east to prepare for Operation Barbarossa. We left of our own accord. Brown sits in silence, because what Göring has said is, in the cold numbers, not entirely false. The casualty figures are closer than the legend allows. The Luftwaffe did turn east in the spring of 1941. The British did not destroy the German Air Force in the summer of 1940. But Brown also knows what Göring is leaving out. He knows that the Luftwaffe failed in its mission to break Britain. He knows that the invasion was cancelled. He knows that the legend is more right than the math. He says later, with the dry honesty of his profession, that he found Göring a charismatic rogue. A man who could justify anything in clean, polite German, while looking you in the eye. The hour ends. They shake hands. Göring is taken away. Brown will never see him again. In October of 1946, the night before he is to be hanged at Nuremberg, Hermann Göring swallows a capsule of potassium cyanide and dies in his cell. The war is over. The reckoning has begun. And in Britain, in the months after Brown's interrogations, a quiet decision is being made that will haunt him for the rest of his life. The British have been building their own supersonic aircraft, the Miles M.52, designed at Farnborough with a flying tail, a biconvex Gillette wing, and a turbofan engine with reheat designed by Frank Whittle himself. The aircraft has been chosen to break the sound barrier. The pilot has been chosen too. He is small enough to fit in the fuselage, barely 5 feet across at the pilot's seat. The first flight is scheduled for October of 1946. In December of 1945, with the aircraft 92% complete, the project is cancelled. No reason is given, no explanation is offered. Brown is told nothing, Frank Whittle is told nothing, Miles Aircraft is told nothing. The decision comes from the Ministry of Supply, and it is simply, abruptly, final. Brown is furious. He spends years trying to understand what happened. He will go to his grave not knowing. But here is what he learns later, piece by piece. 6 months before the cancellation, the Ministry of Aircraft Production ordered the British team to share everything with the visiting Americans. Every blueprint, every test result, every measurement. The Americans took the data home. They gave it to a company called Bell. Bell built an aircraft called the X-1. On the 14th of October 1947, a young American pilot named Chuck Yeager took the X-1 up over the Mojave Desert and flew faster than the speed of sound. The world celebrated. The Americans had broken the barrier. Eric Brown watched the news from Farnborough. He says, in the long, quiet voice of an old man remembering a wound, that it was certainly within our grasp. That he believes he would have done it first. That the cancellation, for reasons no one has ever been able to explain, took something from him that he could never get back. He flies on. He becomes the first man to land a jet aircraft on an aircraft carrier when he puts a de Havilland Sea Vampire onto the deck of HMS Ocean on the 3rd of December 1945. He returns to Germany in 1958 as the head of the British naval mission to help rebuild the German naval air arm and assign it to NATO. He goes back to Lossiemouth as a base commander. He becomes naval aide-de-camp to the Queen. He retires from the Royal Navy in 1970 with the rank of captain. The legacy of the Messerschmitt 262 outlives the Reich that built it. Every jet engine in the world today descends from the path Hans von Ohain chose, not the one Frank Whittle did. The swept wing of the 262 is studied by Soviet engineers and American engineers alike, and within 5 years it appears on 2 aircraft that will fight each other in the skies over Korea. the North American F-86 Sabre, the Mikoyan Gurevich MiG-15, two children of the same German parent killing each other above the Yalu River, while the men who designed their mother sit in dachas outside Moscow and offices in Texas. Walter Nowotny is dead, his engine failing over a field at Akma. Ernst Udet is dead by his own hand in Berlin. Adolf Galland goes to Argentina after the war, advising Perron's Air Force on jet aviation, then comes home to Germany and lives to be 83. Willy Messerschmitt is interned, then released, and dies in 1978, his name still on the aircraft his slave labourers built. Hermann Göring is in a cyanide grave. Irma Gray's is in an unmarked plot in Hamelin. And the men and women who built the wonder weapon in the tunnels at Kuno, in the caves at Gusen, the ones whose names no one wrote down, the ones who died of typhus and beatings and starvation, so that Walter Nowotny could fly his beautiful machine into the sky, they have no monument. They have no graves to visit. They are simply gone. This is the weight Eric Brown carries with him through the rest of his long life. He keeps flying into his 70s. He gives interviews into his 90s. He sits in book-lined studies in southern England and tells the story again and again of the boy who flew with Udet, the young man who survived the Atlantic, the test pilot who flew Hitler's wonder weapon and shook hands with its makers. On the 21st of February 2016, Eric Melrose Brown dies in a hospital in Surrey. He is 97 years old. He is the last man alive who flew the Messerschmitt 262. He is the last man alive who interrogated Hermann Göring. He is the last man alive who walked through the gates of Belsen as a soldier, and the last man who could tell you what it smelled like. When he is buried, an entire era goes into the ground with him. The 262 sits in museums now. In Washington, in Munich, in London. Children walk past it and ask their grandfathers what it is. The grandfathers, the ones old enough to remember, sometimes know. Sometimes they say it was the first jet fighter. Sometimes they say it was a German aircraft from the war. Almost none of them know about Kuno, about the men in striped uniforms, about the 23-year-old Austrian whose engine most likely killed him before any Allied bullet could. About the small Scottish boy who flew with Ernst Udet on a summer day in 1936 and grew up to be the witness of all of it. But now you know. Now the story has been told. Not the legend, the story. The wonder weapon came too late, killed its own pilots, and was built on the backs of slaves. It changed the future of flight. It did not change the war. And the only man who flew it for all the right reasons, who lived to tell what it was really like, was a Scotsman 5 feet 7 inches tall, who happened to speak German, who happened to survive the Atlantic, who happened to walk into the right rooms at the right times. His name was Eric Brown, and the engines you hear above your house tonight, on the airliners crossing the dark sky, all of them, everyone, are the children of what he saw.